The courtroom smelled like old wood and broken promises. I sat at the defendant's table, my hands folded over the stack of documents that would soon destroy my late husband's family, while they preened at the plaintiff's table like vultures who'd already divided the corpse. "Your Honor," their lawyer, a sharp-suited man named Brennan who'd clearly been promised a hefty percentage, stood with theatrical flair. "We intend to prove that Rebecca Chen married David Hartley solely for financial gain, and therefore has no legitimate claim to his estate. She married him for money." My mother-in-law, Evelyn Hartley, shouted from her seat, unable to contain herself. She was nothing but a cocktail waitress when they met. A gold digger who seduced my son. Judge Patricia Winters, a woman who looked like she'd seen every family drama possible in her 30 years on the bench, raised an eyebrow. "Mrs. Hartley, please control your outbursts or I'll have you removed." I touched the simple wedding band on my finger, the one David had insisted on despite his family's demands for something more substantial. He'd understood even then that I valued different things than they did. "My clients," Brennan continued, "will demonstrate that Mrs. Chen, excuse me, Miss Chen, as she insisted on keeping her maiden name, was a calculating opportunist who targeted a grieving widower 20 years her senior." 15 years, I corrected quietly. My lawyer, Janet Morrison, placed a calming hand on my arm, but I could see her fighting a smile. She'd begged me to let her handle the opening statements, but I'd wanted them to dig their hole first. "Furthermore," Brennan gestured dramatically, "we have evidence that Ms. Chen isolated David from his loving family, convinced him to change his will under duress, and hastened his death through neglect." That last accusation made me flinch. David had fought pancreatic cancer for 3 years. I'd been by his side for every treatment, every sleepless night, every small victory and devastating setback. But his family? They'd visited twice, both times to discuss financial matters. "Does the defense wish to make an opening statement?" Judge Winters asked. Janet stood, her movements deliberate and calm. "Your Honor, we'll let the evidence speak for itself. But first, may I submit Exhibit A, Rebecca Chen's professional biography?" "Objection," Brennan called out. "Relevance. It speaks directly to the accusation that my client is a gold digger," Janet replied smoothly. "I'll allow it," the judge said, accepting the document. I watched Judge Winters' face as she read, saw the exact moment her expression shifted from neutral to intrigued. She looked up at me, then back at the document, then directly at Evelyn. "Mrs. Hartley," the judge said slowly, "are you aware of what your daughter-in-law does for a living?" "She doesn't work," Evelyn sniffed. "She quit her cocktail job after trapping David. Lived off his money like a parasite." The judge looked at my file again. "The woman who built a biotech empire? This case is dismissed." Brennan's mouth fell open. Behind him, I heard his briefcase click shut as his assistant recognized a sinking ship. "Your Honor," Brennan stammered, "I don't understand." "Then let me clarify." Judge Winters held up the biography. "According to this, Rebecca Chen founded Neuralink Therapeutics 8 years ago. The company developed 3 FDA-approved treatments for neurodegenerative diseases and is currently valued at $2.8 billion. Ms. Chen owns 47% of the shares." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. "That's..." Evelyn's voice cracked. "That's impossible. She was a waitress. At the Marriott bar. David told us." "I was working at the Marriott bar," I said, standing despite Janet's attempt to stop me. "To pay for my PhD. I was defending my dissertation in molecular biology during the day and bartending at night. That's where I met David. He was at a medical conference, sitting alone at my bar, reading a journal article about gene therapy." "Lies," David's brother Michael spat. "You're making this up." Janet smoothly produced another document. "Exhibit B, Your Honor. Dr. Chen's curriculum vitae. PhD from MIT, postdoctoral work at Johns Hopkins, 17 patents in her name, and over 40 peer-reviewed publications." "I told David about my research that night," I continued, remembering how his eyes had lit up. "He was the first person outside my lab who understood what I was trying to do. We talked until the bar closed about science, about possibilities, about changing the world." "But you lived in his house," Evelyn protested weakly. "Drove his cars. Spent his money. I moved in after we married because he asked me to," I said. "I kept my apartment as an office. As for the cars, David bought me a Tesla because he thought it was funny that a biotech CEO was driving a 15-year-old Honda. I still have that Honda, by the way." Janet was ready with more exhibits. tax returns showing my 8-figure income, investment portfolios that dwarfed David's estate, the prenuptial agreement I'd insisted on to protect my company, one that actually favored David, not me. Your Honor, Janet said, not only is my client not a gold digger, she actually supported Mr. Hartley's research foundation with annual 7-figure donations. She funded his dream of finding a cure for the disease that killed his first wife. That's where you got the money? Michael stood up, his face red. We thought the foundation had found some anonymous benefactor. It did, I said simply. David didn't want people to know. He said his family would suddenly become very interested in medical research if they knew about the donations. He was right, wasn't he? Judge Winters was now looking through the rest of our exhibits with undisguised interest. Ms. Chen, it says here you took a leave of absence from your company 3 years ago. Why? David was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, I said, my voice steady despite the pain of remembering. I wanted to focus on his care. My board wasn't happy, but David was more important than quarterly reports. She let him die, Evelyn whispered. She could have saved him with all that money. I tried, I said, and for the first time my voice cracked. I consulted every specialist in the world, funded experimental treatments, even started a new research division focused on pancreatic cancer. But sometimes love and money aren't enough. Sometimes you just have to hold their hand and be there. Janet produced one final document. Your Honor, this is a letter from David Hartley, notarized and witnessed, explaining his will. Judge Winters read aloud. To whom it may concern, I am writing this letter in sound mind and body to explain my testamentary decisions. My wife, Rebecca, has never asked me for anything except my time and my love. She has her own fortune, her own success, her own life. She married me not for what I could give her, but for who I was. My family, whom I loved despite their flaws, never understood this. They saw her youth and beauty and assumed the worst. They never bothered to Google her, to ask about her work, to wonder why someone would leave a board meeting to sit with me through chemo. I leave my estate to Rebecca not because she needs it, but because she's the only one who ever saw it as unimportant compared to what we shared. She can do with it as she wishes. Knowing her, she'll probably donate it all to research. To my family, I forgive you for this lawsuit. I expected it, but I hope someday you'll see Rebecca for who she is. Not a trophy wife, but the brilliant woman who made my last years worth living. Evelyn was crying now, ugly sobs that echoed through the courtroom. Michael had sunk back into his chair. Even Brennan looked ashamed. The case is dismissed with prejudice, Judge Winters announced. And frankly, I'm appalled it ever made it to court. Mrs. Hartley, Mr. Hartley, you've wasted this court's time with accusations based on nothing but prejudice and greed. The woman you tried to paint as a gold digger has contributed more to society than most of us could dream of. Your Honor, I said, may I address the family? She nodded. I turned to face them. David loved you. Even when you disappointed him, even when you ignored him unless you needed money, even when you called me names at our wedding. He left you each personal items in his will, photo albums, his father's watch, his mother's jewelry, things that mattered to him. But you were so focused on the money that you never even asked about them. We thought. Evelyn's voice was barely a whisper. You were so young, so beautiful. And David was vulnerable after losing Margaret. I was young, I agreed. 28 when we met. But I'd already built my company, already made my fortune. What I didn't have was someone who understood my work, who shared my passion for science, who made me laugh. David gave me that. And in return, I gave him the one thing your family never did, my complete attention. Janet gathered our documents. As we prepared to leave, Michael called out, Rebecca, wait. The research you mentioned, the pancreatic cancer division. Is it real? I paused at the door. The Hartley Institute for Cancer Research. Funded with $50 million of my own money. It's made 3 major breakthroughs in early detection. David got to see the first paper published before he died. Could we? Evelyn stood shakily. Could we visit? See what you've built in his name. I studied her tear-stained face, searching for the woman David had described from his childhood. Warm, curious, supportive. Maybe she was still in there, buried under years of country club politics and social climbing. David would have liked that, I said finally. Call my office. We'll arrange a tour. As Janet and I walked to the parking garage, she shook her head in amazement. In 30 years of practice, I've never seen a case implode so spectacularly. They really had no idea who you were. They never asked, I said simply. They saw what they expected to see, a younger woman with an older, wealthy man. The story wrote itself in their minds. "What will you do with David's estate?" she asked. I thought about the house where we'd been happy, the foundation he'd started, the dreams we'd shared. What I told the judge was true. I don't need the money, but I need to honor what it represents, David's belief that wealth should serve a purpose. Maybe I'll expand the foundation, create scholarships for young scientists, fund more research. Turn their greed into something good. "You're a better person than I would be," Janet said. "After what they put you through." David used to say that the best revenge against small minds is to think bigger than they can imagine, I said. They thought I married him for a few $1,000,000. They'll have to live with knowing they tried to destroy someone who could buy and sell them 100 times over. Someone who loved their son more than they ever bothered to. My phone buzzed. A text from my CFO. Board meeting in an hour. The Tokyo expansion. I smiled, switching gears from grieving widow to CEO. I have to go. Apparently, running a biotech empire waits for no one, not even vindictive in-laws. As I drove away in my 15-year-old Honda, because some things matter more than appearances, I thought about David. How he'd laughed when I told him about my net worth on our third date. How he'd said he felt like he'd won the lottery, not because of my money, but because I'd chosen him. Did you see their faces? I asked the empty car, a habit I'd developed in the months since his death. Your mother actually fainted a little when the judge read the company valuation. I could almost hear his response. Maybe now they'll understand why I fell in love with you. Not because you were beautiful or young, but because you were brilliant and kind. My trophy wife, who happened to be worth more than all the trophies in the world. The Hartley Institute was hosting a symposium next month. I made a mental note to invite his family. Maybe watching the researchers David's memory had inspired would help them understand what they'd missed while counting his money. After all, the best inheritance isn't what someone leaves you. It's what they inspire you to become. And David? He'd inspired me to turn grief into hope, loss into legacy, and a cruel lawsuit into a chance for redemption. Even if it did start with his mother shouting about trophy wives in a courtroom.